Hi, I'm your Wegener and welcome back to the Early Bird Photo News. Let's start this video with a little quiz. Tomorrow I'll be receiving a camera and lens that I've used in the past and I'm looking forward to using it again. And it's actually one of those combos that I could see myself buying because I enjoy it so much. So do you have any idea what they might be? Have a guess in the comments. In one of my autofocusing videos a little while ago where I talked about common autofocusing problems and their fixes, I mentioned that focusing too long onto your subject can actually be detrimental to your autofocusing success because your camera is more likely to wander off your subject or not track it well if it makes a sudden movement. Until now though, I never knew why that is the case. However, last week I got an interesting insight through a friend who discussed this issue with Canon in Europe. Apparently what happens when you focus is that the camera creates a temporary profile or analysis of the scene that you're currently focusing on and then uses that to predict the behavior of your subject and the scene in total. So while in theory that might work really well and probably works quite well with people where the behavior is a lot more predictable, it seems to not work too well for nature photography. Because for instance, if we're anticipating a bird to take off and pre-focus on it for a long time and it might be sitting on a big perch, the camera is actually analyzing the scene of a quite static subject sitting on a quite big static log. So if the bird suddenly takes off, the camera may actually think that we don't want to track the sudden takeoff, but rather the behavior that it has analyzed already where the whole subject is quite static. And in many cases, this might lead to, for instance, the perch being in focus and not the bird taking off. So why cameras are programmed that way, especially when it comes to pre-capture, I don't really know. It would be great if that kind of analysis could be turned off and we could have more of a neutral setting where the camera can also adjust to the bird taking off really quickly. But for now, that seems to be the best explanation I've received so far why the camera sometimes struggles when we're focusing on our subjects too long, especially with pre-capture. If you guys know all about AI autofocusing and the intricacies, let us know in the comments. I'd love to hear more about it and how we might be able to work around this issue. But for now, the advice remains the same. Shorter, sharper bursts of autofocus seem to work better than focusing on your subject for extended periods of time. And this is not only true for Canon, but also for Nikon and in some cases for Sony as well, even though the Sony autofocus seems to work a little bit differently. Last week someone requested a black grouse photo from me, and this is a bird I hadn't photographed since about 2007 when I was in Sweden. So all my files were quite old, flat and dull and only taken with 8 megapixel cameras. And the photo that I liked the most was actually super tight in the frame. And this is something that I liked doing back in the day, but don't like anymore at all now. Seeing some of the nice environment around the bird is definitely something that I value a lot more in photos these days. However, the good part about this story is that it's super easy now to fix too tight shots in Photoshop, and I was actually surprised how easy it was. Because we can simply open our RAW file in Camera Raw, make the necessary adjustments, and then open it up in Photoshop. And when we're on Photoshop, we go to the crop tool and then simply expand the crop tool to the image size that we would like to have. In my case, I wanted to basically have canvas added around the whole frame. And at the bottom of Photoshop, it will say use generative expand to fill in the canvas. And when we now click generate, Photoshop will give us some amazing options that actually look super real and give us a nice wider version of our too tight image. And here's a little trick as well. If you use the generative AI tools, if you go to the 3 selections on the upper right hand side, there's a tiny little tab saying create high res version. And if you click that, you will get slightly better image quality. However, there is one downside that remains with the generative AI creations in Photoshop, because you can only get seamless transitions where you don't see at all that Photoshop has done any work if you use boxes smaller than 1024 by 1024 pixels. What I've just shown you works really well, but if you zoom in really tightly, you can see that the pattern and the noise in the original file is not the same as in the AI generated section. The only way to fix that is to use either smaller boxes or to work on the transitions, something that I both show you in my masterclasses as well. So if you want to take your editing to the next level and learn all about the latest and greatest tools, but also my super solid workflow that you can apply to all your RAW files, whether old or new or easy or difficult to edit, I would highly recommend that you check out my Lightroom and next generation Photoshop masterclasses. In my classes, I teach you step by step and in easy to follow chapters the tools and techniques you need to be able to confidently edit all your RAW files and get great results every time. But of course, you won't just be watching, because I'm also sharing my own RAW files with you so you can edit right alongside me. And if you're not sure if my classes are worth it or the right fit for you, check out some of the amazing reviews I receive on a daily basis from many happy students who I've helped to transform their editing lives and who now get great results and actually love editing their own images. So if you want to turn editing from a frustrating chore where you don't really know where to start or what sliders to pull into a rewarding experience where you have an easy to follow workflow that you can apply to all your RAW files, make sure to check out my Lightroom and Next Generation Photoshop masterclasses down there in the description. I know they will help you a lot and actually make editing a joyful experience. Looking at this black grouse image, I think it's a fantastic example of what is possible with modern technology. Now you can think what you want of the new AI technologies, but I think in this case it's been a tremendous helper. Would you agree? This example also makes me happy that I'm not too strict when it comes to deleting my images. Many people would have deleted a lot of these files in the past because they thought they were too noisy, too tight, too dark, too flat. But with the latest technology, you can actually revamp all these old files and make them shine. Speaking of editing, DxO also released its latest version of the Nik collection, the Nik Collection 8. And this is a tool I use a lot in my editing process. Not necessarily a lot of the filters that come with the Nik collection, but there's 3 filters in particular that I find super useful. The Pro Contrast, the Detail Extractor, and the White Neutralizer. The white neutralizer is perfect to remove color casts on your images, especially if you put it on its own layer and then lower the opacity. The Pro Contrast adds nice contrast to my images, and the Detail Extractor is fantastic at getting more details into difficult areas like the bright red plumes on the head of the black grouse, for instance. If you haven't tried out the Nik collection, I think it's one of those plugins that can actually help you get better results, and I'll link it for you in the description as well. It's been a few slow weeks when it comes to camera news, and we can definitely see that because there's a few wild stories and articles popping up here and there, but there's also a few stories that are worth investigating a little bit further, so let's do that. One of those stories has been the Canon RF 300-600mm f5.6 L lens, and it seems a possibility that we will see this lens this year. When we first talked about this lens, I thought it would be a fantastic addition to the Canon lineup, slotting right in between like the 100-500mm lens and like an f4 600mm prime lens. Finally giving Canon that kind of mid-range zoom lens that hopefully also doesn't break the bank, similar to what Nikon has done with their PF lenses. So in my hopes at least, I was thinking that the lens would slot in somewhere around that $6,000 to $7,000 price mark, a little bit more expensive than the Sigma 300-600 for instance. However, reading the latest article on Canon Rumours, I was quite shocked, because there they suggested that the lens would cost anywhere between $8,000 and $10,000 US, which I thought was definitely quite expensive for that kind of lens. Maybe one could argue that $8,000 is kind of the upper limit of that kind of mid-range, but I would consider that already expensive. In terms of size and weight, I would actually expect the lens to be almost identical to the f2.8 100-300mm lens, because it would have a similar size front element, and I also think the whole lens itself would probably be very similar. The 100-300 is a fantastically performing lens and has given me some fantastic photos, but it's definitely not cheap either, so maybe that price prediction is actually quite accurate. In the end, we just have to wait and see, but I'm happy that Canon seems to be actively working on designing new RF telephoto lenses, which is definitely something that I want to see. We've also seen some chatter about the R6 Mark III again. First it was rumored that it would be released in February, that obviously didn't happen. And now in the article it says it might happen the end of May, may not be imminent, and could happen in the next few months. So, translated, we don't really know. I asked some of my own sources and they haven't heard anything yet. When it comes to the specs, the latest article said that the camera would have slightly different specs to what was rumored before, but at the same time I actually think those specs are pretty similar still. And of course I would also expect that camera to come with great autofocus, probably 30 frames per second, and also shoot 4K 120 frames per second slow motion. So all in all, a fantastic camera that I could definitely see myself getting as well, mainly as a video body. There have been a few rumors about the Nikon Z7 III, but I've been wondering, does it actually make sense for Nikon to release that camera? Doesn't the Z8 cover most of the things that the Z7 III would cover as well? The Z8 has a super fast sensor, high megapixels, and a very well working autofocus. So would a Z7 III with maybe 60 megapixels and less frames per second really make sense and get a lot of people to buy the camera? Or do you think maybe it's a good alternative for landscape shooters and it possibly even come without a stack sensor? It looks like Sony will be releasing a new camera in about 2 weeks on May 28. We don't know what body that will be yet. If you do, let us know in the comments. But it seems unlikely that it's the A7 IV. I know that's one camera a lot of you guys would want to see, but I think we have to wait a little bit longer for it. Of course, it's possible, but we haven't sort of seen any specs trickle through just yet, which makes me think it's probably another camera maybe in a cinema lineup. But of course, if it's an A7 IV, I'm very hopeful that I can get my hands on one and make a review for all of you guys, because I think that will be a fantastic nature photography and wildlife photography camera, especially in combination with a 400 to 800mm lens. Unfortunately, it seems like that many brands will follow Canon's lead and will also update their pricing very soon in the US, including Sigma, who have said that their prices will update from early June. So if you're in the market for gear, it probably makes sense to buy gear rather soon because you might still end up with a cheaper price. And I have some good news for everyone who's been waiting for my R1 setup guide and settings video, because I'm planning to release that this weekend. And the PDF guide will also include my camera setup file, so you can load all my R1 settings onto your R1 with just one click. Yesterday, DJI also released the Mavic 4 Pro, the successor to the Mavic 3 Pro that I currently use. And it seems like quite an interesting update with lots of new video features and also the ability to now shoot vertically with ease with the gimbal just turning. And the drone also has a lot more mobility in the gimbal. For instance, it can point upwards up to 70 degrees, which gives it a lot more movements in your shots. So overall, a nice upgrade, but I'm not entirely sure yet if I will upgrade or not. One thing that could definitely get me to upgrade is the rumored electronic neutral density filter that was meant to come out with the drone, but has not come out just yet. Reading through some articles, it seems like they still have some technical issues with it, but I think having an electronic neutral density filter that you can actually control would be a true game changer for the drone industry, because there's nothing more annoying than shooting in different lighting conditions and always have to land your drone and put on a different filter if you shoot video because you want to keep a certain frame rate. So if the drone comes with an electronic ND filter at some stage, I think it's a must upgrade for me. What are your thoughts on drones? Are they a bit annoying and noisy or something that you use a lot? Let me know in the comments. Also let me know all your other thoughts about this video down there in the comment section. Give me a thumbs up for the video. Check out my channel membership and my masterclasses. And of course, hit that subscribe button and I will see you guys in another video very soon. Bye.